In the quiet realms of Maplewood Estates, a suburban enclave nestled amid sprawling oaks and neatly trimmed lawns, the air often carried the subtle hum of contented life. It was a place where the rhythm of sprinklers kept time with morning routines, and the steady tick-tock of a perfect day rarely faltered. That was until the day I decided to install solar panels. It had seemed so innocuous at first. After all, why not harness the power of the sun? The design was sleek, the technology advanced. I had been instrumental in drafting the very energy bill that encouraged such adoption, a quiet ripple in the sea of change. My career had been built on such efforts, nudging policy toward a greener horizon. But here, in the manicured confines of Maplewood, change was met with resistance cloaked in floral print, the kind that wields the HOA rulebook like a sword. Enter Karen. Karen, with her perfectly arranged haircut and penchant for pastel cardigans, was the self-appointed guardian of our neighborhood's aesthetic purity. Her eyes, sharp and assessing, could spot a rogue dandelion from a mile away. She was the kind of person who believed in the sanctity of uniformity, where deviation was not just unwelcome, it was a personal affront. The first time she saw the panels glinting under the morning sun, her lips pursed in a thin line of disapproval. She had approached my door with the deliberation of a general marching to battle. I watched from the window as she stood on my porch, her clipboard clutched like a shield. Her knock was crisp, demanding attention, a clarion call. I opened the door with a measured calmness, an ocean against her storm. Her words were sharp, like shards of glass in the soft morning air. The panels, she insisted, violated the harmonious visage of our community. I listened, nodding slightly, my mind tracing the irony. My life's work judged unsightly by a woman whose prized tulips were the talk of the annual garden club. My response was gentle, a breeze against her tempest. I explained the benefits, the alignment with state policies, the very ones I had shaped with care. Her eyes narrowed, a predator sizing up its prey. She was undeterred, resolute in her mission. The conversation ended with a promise of escalation. Days passed, and her displeasure manifested in petty actions. A hedge trimmed a smidge too far, a complaint about noise that didn't exist. Yet, I remained unruffled. Patience was my armor. I had weathered storms far greater than this. Then came the climax of her crusade, the call to 911. She reported an unauthorized structure, a threat to the neighborhood's aesthetic integrity. The police car parked outside my home was a spectacle, sirens silent but lights flashing a quiet dissonance. Neighbors peered from behind curtains drawn by curiosity and a hint of schadenfreude. The officer was courteous, slightly bemused by the situation. We stood together, surveying the panels as if they were modern art, which in a way they were. A testament to progress, misunderstood by those who feared it. As the officer left, Karen watched from her front yard, her expression a triumphant mix of vindication and defiance. I allowed myself a small smile, a secret to the sun-drenched day. This was but the opening act, a prologue to the real unraveling. And in the quiet aftermath, as the neighborhood settled back into its rhythm, I prepared for the next move. Patience, after all, was not only a virtue, it was a strategy. The sirens faded into the distance, leaving behind a simmering calm that belied the storm I knew was gathering. Karen, with her perfect bob and permanently furrowed brow, had launched the first salvo, a call to the police for the high crime of solar installation. Who knew energy independence was such a threat? In the following days, the HOA's communication channels buzzed like an overactive hive. As I opened the mailbox, it was no surprise to find a letter, crisp and official. It bore the mark of bureaucracy, an HOA citation. The ink blazed with accusations. Non-compliance with community aesthetics. My solar panels, they claimed, disrupted the neighborhood's uniformity, as if their pristine lawns and identical mailboxes were a utopia threatened by silicon and glass. I imagined Karen at her kitchen table, fingers stained with ink, crafting her narrative with the precision of a thriller novelist. She probably saw herself as the guardian of suburbia, a paladin of property values. But the absurdity of her crusade was not lost on me. How far would she go to preserve this facade? Next came the rules. Suddenly, every small detail of existence was under scrutiny. Grass height limitations, mailbox dimensions, even the acceptable shades of door paint. A new bylaw seemed to materialize overnight, as if conjured by Karen's sheer will. The neighborhood grapevine was alive with speculation. Whispers floated through the air like autumn leaves caught in a breeze. Karen had become a legend, half demon, half watchdog. Yet, her authority was not absolute. The state energy bill, the one I had painstakingly crafted, was a stronghold she could not breach. It stood as a testament to progress, to the future. A quiet revolution in legal text, protecting the rights of homeowners to harness the sun's power. This was more than a neighborhood squabble. It was a clash between the old world and the new, between fear and forward thinking. I wondered how much of Karen's fury was truly about aesthetics, or if it was something deeper, a resistance to change, to losing control. Did she see in those panels a reflection of time slipping away, of a world evolving beyond her grasp? The days turned into weeks, and Karen's campaign intensified. Flyers appeared on doorsteps, warning of the dangers my panels posed. Lower property values, increased crime, sun glare that could blind a driver, each claim more ludicrous than the last. Yet in her zeal, she failed to see the irony. Her own actions, the disruptions, the incessant complaints, were what truly disturbed the peace. My response was silence, not out of defeat, but strategy. I let her spin her web, knowing it would eventually ensnare only herself. Meanwhile, my panels continued their silent work, converting sunlight into energy, unbothered by the tumult beneath. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I stood by the window. From this vantage point, I could see the panels glistening in the dying light. They stood firm, a testament to perseverance and vision. Karen and her cronies could squabble. The sun would rise again, indifferent to human pettiness. In this quiet moment, I felt a profound sense of peace. The panels were not just a source of power, they were a reminder of resilience, a reminder that the world changes, sometimes slowly, sometimes in bursts of brilliance, like a solar flare. And while some may resist, clutching desperately to the past, others adapt, embrace the new dawn. The battle was far from over, but I knew where I stood. In the end, time and truth had a way of asserting themselves. Tomorrow, the sun would shine again, and with it, the promise of a brighter future. In the aftermath of her dramatic 911 call, Karen wore the satisfaction of perceived victory like a badge. The neighborhood buzzed with whispers of her latest antics, her reputation for stirring chaos only bolstered by this latest episode. Meanwhile, I remained in the eye of the storm, untouched by the winds swirling around me. My solar panels stood resilient and unbothered on the roof, silent witnesses to the unfolding drama. I began documenting everything with the precision of a historian. Each meeting, each veiled threat, each disapproving glance from Karen in the cul-de-sac, captured meticulously a catalog of petty grievances that, when strung together, painted a vivid tapestry of her overreach. The power of evidence lay in its ability to distill truth from chaos. The HOA bylaws, Byzantine in their complexity, were my bedtime reading. Within their endless clauses, I sought the loopholes, the contradictions, and the opportunities for quiet defiance. Knowledge is power, and I was amassing it with the patience of a spider spinning its web. Karen's indignation was palpable whenever she glanced my way. Her eyes narrowed, evaluating, searching for weakness. Yet, I offered her none. Instead, I smiled, a calm, knowing smile that hinted at an understanding she could never reach. It infuriated her, and that was its own quiet victory. In the meantime, my work on the state energy bill had proceeded without interruption, a bill designed to make solar power not just permissible, but encouraged. It was an irony not lost on me, that Karen's protests were not only futile, but actively counterproductive. She was railing against the future, a future I was helping to shape from the inside out. I crafted a letter addressed to the HOA, its tone measured and respectful, yet underpinned with a steely resolve. It was a subtle counter, a strategic move in a game of chess where Karen thought only of checkers. The letter cited the forthcoming bill, gently reminding them of the legal shifts on the horizon. It was a nudge, not a shove, a reminder of the inevitable. In the days that followed, the neighborhood settled into a tense calm. Karen's protests grew quieter, her tactics shifting to whispers and sideways glances. She was beginning to sense the shifting tides, the slow but steady drift away from the old ways she clung to so desperately. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the pavement, Karen cornered me by the mailbox. Her veneer of civility barely masked the simmering frustration underneath. "You think you're clever," she spat, words laced with venom. I paused, holding her gaze with a calm serenity born of certainty. "I don't need to be," I replied softly, allowing the weight of inevitability to hang between us. Her silence was my answer, a reluctant acknowledgement of a battle she couldn't win. As I walked away, the cool evening air filled with the scent of blooming jasmine, I felt a quiet satisfaction settle over me. The panels on my roof glinted in the fading light, silent sentinels overlooking a neighborhood on the brink of change. In the end, it wasn't about winning or losing. It was about progress, and progress, like time, refused to be halted. Karen's shadow receded, and with it, the tyranny of her reign. The future loomed bright and unyielding, and I welcomed it with open arms. The dissonant wail of sirens had faded into memory, leaving behind a neighborhood draped in uneasy silence. The splendor of the solar panels, my own sun-harnessing harbingers of change, gleamed defiantly in the midday light, indifferent to the chaos they had unintentionally sown. I stood at my window, watching their reflection dance on the slick pavement, contemplating the quiet power embedded in those panels. Karen's shrill presence still lingered like an unwelcome specter. Her desperate calls to authority, a cacophony of indignation, had been silenced by the firm and undeniable boundaries of legal code. She hadn't known, of course, that her nemesis had been the author of the very statutes she attempted to weaponize against me, was a twist both ironic and potent. I had poured soul into the crafting of those energy bills, each line a testament to a future unshackled from antiquated norms, a future that Karen, with her unyielding allegiance to conformity, simply could not comprehend. As the ink dried on that legislation, I'd felt a quiet satisfaction. Now that satisfaction came full circle. The next steps required precision. I lowered the blinds, retreating from the outside world to the sanctuary of my study, where the scent of old books mingled with the faint hum of electronics. It was here, in this cocoon of thought, that I would choose my course of action. One that would speak with the authority of law rather than the chaos of confrontation. I began by pulling up the records, each keystroke a deliberate motion in an intricate dance. The Homeowners Association bylaws lay bare on my screen, their rigidity ripe for challenge. I combed through them, seeking the chinks in their armor, the loopholes that would weave a narrative of change. And there they were, hidden in the dense paragraphs like whispered secrets, exemptions for state-mandated green initiatives, A clause overlooked, a detail dismissed. The irony did not escape me. Karen, in her fervor, had become the catalyst for her own undoing. The bylaws, meant to enforce uniformity, now crumbled under the weight of their contradictions. I documented each finding, my resolve solidifying into a quiet, formidable force. With a few final clicks, I sent the necessary correspondences, weaving through the bureaucracy with the deftness of a seamstress. The state's Energy Commission would hear of this. The local media might catch wind, not through malice, but through the simple, unerring course of justice. A light knock at the door jarred me from my reverie. The mail had arrived, a mundane reminder of the world beyond my machinations. Among the usual bills and advertisements lay a letter from the HOA. It was a mere formality, an acknowledgement of the inevitable. I set it aside, the corners of my mouth curling in amusement. They would find their fight futile, their objections a whisper against the storm of progress. I stepped outside, the anticipation of change electrifying the air. The neighborhood, with its manicured lawns and predictable patterns, felt on the cusp of something new. I imagined the whispers that would follow, the ripple effect of one decision. Karen might find herself the subject of gossip, her zealous attempts branded as a folly against the tide of innovation. And in this quiet rebellion, I found peace, a resolve as steady as the march of technology. It wasn't revenge, I mused, but rather the gentle nudge of inevitability. The panels gleamed above, sentinels in a battle only I knew we'd already won. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that hangs before an approaching storm, as neighbors gathered in the community hall. The irony was not lost on me. The very place that had once echoed with Karen's sharp commands now buzzed with a different energy. Her influence had been a shadow, reaching into every corner, but not today. Today, the light finally touched those hidden places. I stood at the edge of the crowd, a quiet observer of my own story's climax. It was a strange feeling, watching the culmination of months, no, years, unfold before me. The state energy bill, my bill, now law, had turned the tables in ways Karen never anticipated. These solar panels, once the symbol of my defiance against her petty tyranny, now stood as beacons of change. Each panel a glint of sunlight, each house a testament to resilience. Karen's face was a mask of indignation, her eyes scanning the room for allies that had slowly slipped away. Her power had been a delicate lattice of fear and favor, now crumbling like an unsteady sandcastle against the rising tide. The community had chosen clean energy and collective benefit over the illusion of control she had wielded. As I moved through the crowd, I caught fragments of conversations, murmurs of camaraderie. The neighbors who once bent to her will now spoke of plans, of gardens thriving under new light, of shared resources and mutual respect. The air buzzed with possibilities, each one dismissing Karen's desperate attempts to regain her footing. She approached me then, a forced smile stretched thin across her lips. Her words were meant to sting, but they fell flat, echoes of a past that no longer held sway. She realized, perhaps too late, how the tables had turned. Her threats of calling 911 now seemed laughably empty, a flare sent up in a sky already bright with day. A hush settled as the community leader took the floor. Not Karen, but someone new. Someone who understood the real meaning of leadership. A voice that spoke of unity, of progress, of a future where everyone had a stake. The irony struck me again. Karen had called the police on me once, a desperate ploy to reclaim lost authority. Now, she could only watch as her reign was dismantled bit by bit. A single cheer rose from the back of the room, a ripple of approval spreading outward. It was an acknowledgement not just of change, but of a shared vision. I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction, not from Karen's defeat, but from the community's awakening. It was a victory far beyond the personal, a realization that one voice, when echoed by many, could indeed shift the balance. Karen's silhouette receded into the background, her presence no longer the focus. She was an afterthought now, a footnote in a story that wasn't hers to tell. I felt a quiet sense of closure as I turned away from her, stepping into the warmth of the gathered crowd. The hall was alive with renewed energy, and for the first time it felt like a true community, a place where ideas could take root and grow, unburdened by the shadow of a single will. The storm had passed, leaving behind a sky clear and wide, a horizon open to endless possibility. In this new light, the path forward was clear. We had written our own narrative, one built on cooperation and shared dreams. As I stepped outside, the sun caught the edge of the solar panels, casting rainbows on the pavement. It was a fitting symbol, I thought, of hope, refracted through the prism of change.